My name is Ray Colorado. Today I will give you a brief history of the Filipino language. What do you call the national language of the Filipinos? When a foreigner asks this question, most Filipinos say the national language of the Filipinos is Tagalog. It saves the foreigner confusion. But among the Filipinos, this topic can lead to a bitter debate. Some will say the national language is Filipino, spelled with a P, and some will say Filipino, spelled with an F. I hope by the end of this short lesson, you will understand the difference and be able to approach this topic with confidence. When the Spaniards claimed the Philippines as a territory in the 16th century, the Philippines was not a unified nation and did not share a common language. The territory had thousands of islands, about 7,000 in all, and many of these islands had their own languages. Some islands, like Luzon, had several distinct languages, among them Ilocano, Tagalog, and Bicol. The Spaniards in the Philippines, particularly the missionaries, wanted Filipinos to learn Spanish. However, the church and government in Spain did not want a repeat of the abuses done by the Spaniards in Mexico. In Mexico, Mexicans who failed to learn Spanish were severely punished, not just with fines, but with physical pain like whipping and imprisonment. That earned the Spaniards and Spain a reputation of cruelty and tarnished the image of Roman Catholicism, the Christian religion the Spaniards were trying to spread. So the Spaniard missionaries in the Philippines took a different approach, one they considered kinder and gentler among the Filipino natives. Instead of forcing the Filipinos to learn Spanish, the missionaries studied and learned the native languages. This approach proved very effective and lasting. The natives embraced Roman Catholicism, and it became the dominant religion in the Philippine archipelago. A negative effect of that approach, however, was the failure to unite the country under one language. The regional differences remained distinct, and even the American occupation and then the Japanese occupation could not change it. Today, 4 centuries after the Spaniards claimed the Philippines as an integrated territory, the country is still divided by about 120 languages. To many Filipinos, this was not a problem, for it also resulted in the preservation of not only their language, but their art and culture as well. Each language has its own grammar, vocabulary, songs, poetry, and set of idioms. The Spaniard missionaries not only learned them, but also documented and propagated them. Thus, when Filipinos celebrate their various fiestas, they do so not in Spanish, certainly not in English, but in their own native tongue. But not all Filipinos were content to using their own languages. During the Spanish colonial period, proficiency in the Spanish language was required for government, church, or business employment. Because there was no mandatory education in Spanish, very few Filipinos were qualified. This resulted in public, religious, and business leadership being monopolies of the Spaniards, a fact strongly resented by the Filipinos. Toward the end of the 19th century, an increasing number of Filipinos had gained mastery of the Spanish language. The Spaniards, however, continued the practice of racial discrimination by reserving all higher positions for themselves. A few Filipinos, determined to achieve parity with Spaniards, were not only persecuted but also martyred. The strong resentment such practice engendered gave rise to a nationwide rebellion against Spain and the Spaniards. The rebellion spread and grew, uniting the people in a revolution to form a national Filipino government. Many Spaniards, born and raised in the Philippines, chose to become Filipinos and also joined the revolution. The rebels proclaimed independence from Spain on June 12, 1898, in Kawit, Cavite. In the beginning, Spanish was the official language of the revolution. The national anthem was written in Spanish. The Declaration of Independence itself was written and read in Spanish. Choosing Spanish made sense then because it was already the country's official language. But not all were happy with the choice of Spanish as the language of the revolution. Some people believed the national language of the new nation should be based on people's own language, like Tagalog. The choice of Tagalog was reasonable because 7 of the 8 original provinces that started the revolution, Tarlac, Nueva Ecija, Bulacan, Manila, Cavite, Laguna, and Batangas, were Tagalog-speaking provinces. The 8th province, Pampanga, was not predominantly Tagalog-speaking, but people there understood Tagalog because the other 7 provinces were once part of the Grand Pampanga province. As the Philippines evolved from a mere colony to a fully independent republic, the national desire to have a national language became stronger. This desire climaxed during World War II when, once again, Filipinos were forced by a foreign master to learn yet another language, Japanese. Earlier, they had to learn English from the Americans, and for centuries, they had to learn Spanish just to qualify for any humble job. When the war was over, there was a massive effort for the country to have a national language. All Filipino schools were required to teach a nationalized version of Tagalog. Beginning in 1959, this version of Tagalog became known as Filipino. Because Filipino uses the syntax and vocabulary of Tagalog, some say Filipino was nothing but Tagalog. But it really was more than that because there were regional differences in the usage and style of Tagalog. These regional differences had to be eliminated or unified to produce a consistent language called Filipino. The responsibility to unify Tagalog, to create a national language, was assigned to the Institute of National Language, also known as Surian ng Wikang Pambansa. Here are examples of the unifying process the Institute of National Language had to accomplish. In Bicol, the question "do you" is formed by affixing "na" to the root word. So how do you say, "Do you eat fish?" The root word for eat is kain. Combine this root word with "na" and you have nakain. The noun for fish is isda. So you say, "Nakain ka ba ng isda?" to mean, "Do you eat fish?" The syntax and usage of such a statement is fine in Bicol because it will be properly understood there. The problem is it does not come across correctly in other Tagalog-speaking provinces. In Manila, for instance, the question "Nakain ka ba ng isda?" means, "Were you eaten by fish?" So what is correct Tagalog in Bicol may not be correct Tagalog in Manila. As an example of regional differences in style between Batangas and Bulacan, to say, "She is beautiful in Batangas," you can say, "Maganda siya eh." In Bulacan, you say, "Siya ay maganda." There are also regional differences in Tagalog diction. In Pampanga, Tagalog words with the letter H lose the H sound. Thus, bahay, which is Tagalog for house, becomes baay. Likewise, words without H acquire the H sound. Thus, mataas, which is Tagalog for high or tall, becomes matahas. While this speaking style is perfectly fine in Pampanga, it is considered improper in Manila and other provinces. These examples of regional differences meant there was also a need to call the national language by another name, instead of simply calling it Tagalog. In 1959, nationalized Tagalog was formally reintroduced in all schools as the Filipino language. Because nationalized Tagalog, which became known as Filipino, had well-defined rules of usage and interpretation, it became useful in legal, commercial, and military transactions. From the 1940s to 1980s, this process of unifying and propagating of a national language proved very successful. It is safe to say that today a good majority of Filipinos speak nationalized Tagalog or Filipino. In the late 1980s, there were efforts to call Filipino by another name, Filipino.